Hi there, it's Miss Jones from Sew with Miss Jones. I am going to show you a new project. This one is by the company Start to Sew, and it is a simple mask. Now, if you go on YouTube and look for making a mask, there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of different tutorials that show you how to make a mask. This one is different. This one is made so that students can make this at home without a sewing machine. Because of what's going on right now, the pandemic of 2020, lots of us have begun to wear masks. And it also means that lots of us cannot go to our schools in order to take our family and consumer sciences classes. The other thing is, if you want to just learn to make a very simple, very easy to put together mask without having to use a sewing machine, the Start to Sew project, have it upside down. The Start to Sew project is a very easy one to do, and I'm going to show you how to do that. You can order this directly from the company if you want to. Check out Facebook. Anyway, now the pandemic's going to disappear one of these days. We're going to figure out what to do to make sure that everybody is safe. But I have asthma. And so even before this all happened and everybody else was wearing masks, I always would try to wear a mask outside in the wintertime whenever it was really, really cold. It would help me from having an asthma attack. So this is something that maybe we're going to make right now because there's this awful thing happening in the world, but they're actually a very good thing to have all the time. In other countries, many people also wear masks, especially during the cold and flu season, because it helps keep them from getting sick. So I'm going to help you learn how to make the simple mask from Start to Sew in step by step from the beginning to the end, so that you can be successful with this. Remember, you do not have to have a sewing machine to do this, and we will take a look at what's inside the package and what you might need to get in addition to what you have in your project. So let's open up the project bag and find out what's inside and what else we might need to do this project. So I have already opened up the edge of my bag. You might want to hang on to this bag so that you can keep the extra bits in there until you are finished. But you get a guide sheet. A guide sheet is a set of directions that shows you how to put together a sewing project, whether you are starting completely from scratch or whether you are using a project bag that has already been put together for you. So let's take a look at your project bag. Over here it says what the contents are. It says two pre-cut fabric pieces, thread, a shoestring, and instructions. And your instructions are your guide sheet. In addition to those things, there are a couple more things, but let's look at what's in the bag first. So here's the shoestring, and it's long enough. You only need one because the way that we put it together, you're only going to have one tie, and it's going to fit around your head. And then I have this really lovely bright yellow, and then the print that goes with it is this really cool kind of mottled gray, two colors of gray and some yellow spots on it. And I like dotted fabric, so I'm really happy with this one. Now, your fabric might look completely different because I understand these projects are made with lots of different kinds of fabric. Usually one of them is a plain fabric and the other one is a printed fabric, and you can decide which one you want to be on the inside or the outside. I'm going to use the dots on the outside because I love dots. There should also be a small spool of thread. in your bag. Now, there are a couple of things in here, or that are not in here, that you will also need. One of them is a pair of scissors. Now, these don't have to be fancy sewing scissors because we're mostly going to be using them to cut threads or to clip the corners after we have sewn the front and the back together. So they don't have to be fancy, they don't have to be expensive, they don't even have to be this big. They have to be sharp enough that you can clip across the corners before you turn your mask right side out. I would also suggest that you have either a highlighter or a penciler or a pen. I like to make notes on my guide sheet whenever I am working with one, and this is what I ask my students to do as well. I would suggest that you have a little chunk of scrap fabric. This actually is a couple of pieces. Oh, I've got thread all over here. This is a couple of pieces that was left over after I redesigned one of my school t-shirts because it was way too boxy looking and I wanted it to look a little bit more flattering on my shape. And so I just have a couple of layers of this, and I'm going to use this to practice my stitches before I actually do them on my project. Now, yours doesn't have to be t-shirt fabric. If you have a piece of clothing at home that is, you know, headed for the rag bag and you just want to use a chunk of that, absolutely do that. I just always find that it's easier to practice your stitches whether you're using the machine or by hand before you actually start on your project. You'll be a lot happier when you feel comfortable making the stitches before you actually start working on your project. The other thing that you're going to need, so we've got something to write with or a highlighter, and you've got your scissors, and the other thing that is not in the bag is a hand sewing needle. Now, these are pretty easy to find either at a craft store. Your parents might already have one around the house, and that's okay. If you're going to buy some, I would highly recommend that you get embroidery needles. And I like size 5, and I like size 9. One of the reasons why I like to use embroidery needles rather than regular needles is these things have a big eye. And when you are first doing your hand sewing, it's hard to see the eye. And if you're older like me, it's still hard to see the eye. So I just think it's easier to start with a needle that has a bigger eye. Now, if you happen to have a package that looks kind of like this, and many of them do look like this, you just have to look inside of here, and there are some with bigger eyes. Just make sure it's not too fat. If it's too fat, it's going to be hard to get through your fabric. So choose one with a big eye that's not too fat. And the way to test that is, you know, on your practice, if you're struggling to get the needle through, then try to find one that's a little bit smaller. Now, you might not have any trouble at all using one that has a small eye. If you can do that, fantastic. It's just harder for me because my eyes are older. And also, if you're brand new, that's a little harder. Okay, so I think we know what we need to get started. And I am going to show you the next thing that we need to do for this mask project.